What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors sits down for what should be a simple interview, only to discover his host has an agenda that goes far beyond entertainment? In just 31 seconds, Kelly Clarkson would make a comment so shocking, so completely out of line, that it would destroy her reputation and send Samuel L. Jackson storming off her set in the most explosive talk show moment ever captured on live television. The Kelly Clarkson Show was supposed to be different. After years of morning television dominated by manufactured drama and scripted controversies, Kelly had promised audiences something real, something authentic. Her warm smile and girl-next-door charm had won over millions of viewers who tuned in daily for what they believed was genuine conversation with their favorite celebrities. But on this particular Tuesday morning, something was wrong. Very wrong. Samuel L. Jackson walked onto the bright, cheerful set wearing his trademark black suit and confident smile. The audience erupted in applause as he waved, clearly excited to see one of cinema's most beloved stars. He settled into the guest chair across from Kelly, who beamed at him with what appeared to be genuine enthusiasm. "Samuel L. Jackson, everybody," Kelly announced to thunderous applause. "Thank you so much for being here. I have to say, I'm such a huge fan of your work." "Thank you, Kelly. Happy to be here," Samuel replied, his voice carrying that familiar gravitas that had made him famous in countless films. "Now I have to ask," Kelly continued, her tone still light and friendly, "with over 150 films under your belt, you must have some incredible stories from Hollywood." Samuel nodded thoughtfully. "Oh, absolutely. I've been blessed to work with some amazing people over the years. Directors like Quentin Tarantino, Spike Lee, the whole Marvel family. Each experience teaches you something new." The conversation flowed smoothly for the first few minutes. Kelly asked about his latest projects, his family, his approach to choosing roles. Samuel answered each question with the professionalism and charm that had made him not just a movie star, but a genuinely respected figure in the industry. "You know," Kelly said, leaning forward slightly, "I've always wondered about something. As an actor, you've played so many different characters, but there's always been this intensity to your performances. Where does that come from?" "Well," Samuel began, "I think authenticity is everything in this business. Whether you're playing a hero or a villain, the audience can tell if you're being real or just going through the motions. I try to bring truth to every role." "Truth?" Kelly repeated, nodding. "That's interesting. Speaking of truth, I have to ask you about something that's been bothering me." The shift in her tone was subtle but unmistakable. The warmth had drained from her voice, replaced by something sharper, more calculating. Samuel's expression remained neutral, but there was a slight tension in his posture now. "Sure," he said carefully. "You've been very vocal about certain political issues over the years," Kelly continued, her smile never wavering, even as her words grew more pointed. "Some people might say you've been quite aggressive in your opinions." "I believe in standing up for what's right," Samuel replied evenly. "I think we all have a responsibility to speak out against injustice when we see it." Kelly's laugh was light, almost musical, but there was something cold underneath it. "Oh, I completely understand that. But don't you think sometimes celebrities should just, stick to entertaining people? I mean, when you start getting political, doesn't that just divide your audience?" The question hung in the air for a moment. Samuel's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I think," he said slowly, "that being a celebrity doesn't mean you give up your right to have opinions about the world around you. If anything, having a platform means you have more responsibility to use it thoughtfully." Right, Kelly said, waving her hand dismissively. "But here's what I don't understand. You talk about injustice and standing up for what's right, but isn't it a little hypocritical coming from someone who's made millions playing violent characters? I mean, how many people have you killed on screen? Hundreds?" The audience had gone quiet now. Even they could sense that something was shifting, that this wasn't the comfortable celebrity chat they'd expected. "Those are fictional characters, Kelly," Samuel said, his voice remaining steady, but with an edge of warning. "I think most people can distinguish between an actor playing a role and real life." "Can they, though?" Kelly pressed. "I mean, when kids see Samuel L. Jackson on screen with a gun, shooting people, using language that would make a sailor blush, what message does that send? And then you turn around and lecture people about morality and justice? It seems a bit contradictory to me." Samuel stared at her for a long moment. The studio lights seemed harsher now, the bright colors of the set almost garish under the sudden tension. "Are you seriously suggesting," he said slowly, "that playing fictional characters somehow disqualifies me from having opinions about real-world issues?" "I'm just saying," Kelly replied, her tone still artificially sweet, That maybe someone who's built a career on screen violence shouldn't be so quick to judge others. That's all. The words hit like a slap. Samuel's eyes flashed with something dangerous, the kind of controlled fury that had made him so compelling on screen but was now very, very real. Judge others, he repeated. Kelly, I think you might want to be more careful about how you frame this conversation. But Kelly Clarkson was just getting started. What happened next would shock everyone in that studio and prove that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one with the biggest smile. Oh, Samuel, Kelly said with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. I think you're being a little sensitive. I'm just having a conversation here. Sensitive? Samuel's voice dropped to that low, dangerous register that anyone who'd seen Pulp Fiction would recognize. Kelly, you just accused me of being a hypocrite for having opinions while being an actor? That's not conversation. That's an attack. Kelly's smile widened, but her eyes remained cold. An attack? Come on, Samuel. You're a big, tough guy, right? I mean, that's your whole image. The badass who doesn't take anything from anybody. Surely you can handle a few simple questions. The condescension in her voice was unmistakable now. Samuel leaned back in his chair, studying her with the intensity of a predator sizing up its prey. What exactly are you trying to do here, Kelly? He asked quietly. I'm trying to have an honest conversation, she replied, her voice dripping with false innocence. You see, Samuel, I've been doing some research on you, and I found some very interesting things. She reached over to her desk and picked up a stack of papers, waving them dramatically. Did you know that you once got arrested for holding board members hostage during a protest in college? That's right, folks. Our guest here has quite the history with law enforcement. The audience shifted uncomfortably. This wasn't the light entertainment they'd come for. Samuel's face had gone stone cold. That was 40 years ago, Kelly. I was protesting segregation and fighting for civil rights. I'm proud of that arrest. Oh, I'm sure you are, Kelly said mockingly. And what about all those interviews where you've used profanity? The angry outbursts? The threats against politicians? You have quite the temper, don't you, Samuel? I have passion for justice, Samuel replied, his voice deadly calm. If that bothers you, that says more about you than it does about me. Kelly laughed again, that same brittle sound. Justice? Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I sit, it looks more like an angry man who can't control himself. Tell me, Samuel, do you ever worry that you might be part of the problem instead of the solution? The question hit the studio like a bomb. Even the crew members behind the cameras looked uncomfortable. Samuel's hands gripped the arms of his chair. Excuse me? He said, his voice barely above a whisper. Well, think about it, Kelly continued, clearly enjoying herself now. You're always talking about racism and inequality, but you've made a fortune playing stereotypical roles. The angry black man with a gun, the criminal, the villain. Don't you think you've contributed to some of the very stereotypes you claim to be fighting against? The silence in the studio was deafening. Samuel stared at Kelly with an expression that could have melted steel. When he spoke, his voice was so quiet that everyone had to strain to hear him. Did you just say what I think you said? I'm just asking questions that I think a lot of people want to ask, Kelly replied, her smile never faltering. You've built your career on playing dangerous black men, and now you want to lecture everyone about social justice? Don't you see the irony in that? Samuel stood up slowly from his chair. The movement was deliberate, controlled, but everyone in the studio could feel the fury radiating from him. Lady, he said, his voice carrying the full weight of decades of experience dealing with exactly this kind of ignorance. You just crossed a line that you can't uncross. Kelly looked up at him, still smiling, but for the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. Samuel, please sit down. We're having a discussion here. No, Samuel said firmly. We're not having a discussion. You're trying to tear me down on live television using some of the oldest, most disgusting tactics in the book. And I'm not going to sit here and let you do it. Oh, come on, Kelly said, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. You're being dramatic. I'm just asking tough questions. Isn't that what journalists are supposed to do? Samuel's laugh was harsh and bitter. Journalist? Is that what you think you are? Kelly, you're not a journalist. You're a talk show host who just tried to use racist talking points to attack a guest. There's a difference. The color drained from Kelly's face. I'm not a racist, Samuel. How dare you accuse me of that? Then explain to me, Samuel said, his voice rising now. Why you think playing fictional characters somehow means I can't have opinions about real-world injustice. Explain to me why you think I've contributed to stereotypes by taking roles that put food on my table and supported my family. Explain to me why you think 40-year-old civil rights activism is somehow a mark against my character. Kelly stammered. I was just trying to. I mean, people have questions about what? Samuel demanded. About why a successful black man has the audacity to speak up about inequality? About why I don't just shut up and be grateful for what I have? Is that what this is about? That's not what I meant, Kelly said weakly, but her voice lacked any conviction. Then what did you mean? Samuel pressed. Because from where I'm standing, you just spent the last 10 minutes trying to tear down everything I've worked for, everything I believe in, using some of the same arguments that people have been using to silence black voices for generations. The studio was dead silent now. Kelly looked around desperately, as if searching for help that wasn't coming. Her production team looked mortified. The audience sat in stunned silence. What happened next would become the most replayed moment in talk show history, as Samuel L. Jackson delivered a response so powerful, so utterly devastating, that it would end Kelly Clarkson's career in a single sentence. Samuel, please, Kelly said, her voice cracking slightly. I think there's been a misunderstanding here. I never meant to. I was just trying to. Stop, Samuel said, holding up his hand. His voice was calm now, but there was something terrifying in that calmness. Just stop talking, Kelly. Every word you say is making this worse. Kelly's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The confident, smiling host from just minutes earlier had completely disappeared, replaced by someone who was clearly in way over her head. You want to know what the real problem is here? Samuel continued, his voice carrying the weight of authority that came from decades of commanding respect in one of the most challenging industries in the world. The problem is that you brought me on your show under false pretenses. You made me think this was going to be a normal interview, a conversation between professionals. Instead, you ambushed me with gotcha questions and racist talking points. They're not racist. Kelly protested weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. Samuel's eyes blazed. Kelly, you just told a black man that he can't speak about injustice because he's played fictional characters in movies. You suggested that my civil rights activism was somehow a negative thing. You implied that I've hurt my own community by taking roles that supported my family. If that's not racism, then what exactly do you call it? Kelly looked around the studio desperately. Her producers were frantically making hand gestures from behind the cameras, but there was no way to salvage this disaster. The damage had been done, and it was getting worse by the second. I call it asking hard questions, Kelly said, but her voice was barely above a whisper now. Hard questions? Samuel's voice rose again. Kelly, hard questions would be asking me about the craft of acting, about the challenges of Hollywood, about my experiences working with great directors. What you did was try to use my success against me, try to make me feel guilty for having opinions while black. The phrase hung in the air like a thunderclap. Kelly's face went white as paper. I didn't, I would never, she stammered. You would never what? Samuel demanded. You just did, Kelly. On live television, in front of your audience, you just tried to put me in my place using arguments that come straight out of the racist playbook. And the worst part is, I don't think you even realize how offensive you're being. Kelly's eyes filled with tears, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of someone who had been caught, exposed, and had no way out. Samuel, I'm sorry if you took it that way, but that's not what I intended, she said, her voice breaking. If I took it that way? Samuel's voice was incredulous. Kelly, there's only one way to take it. You just spent 15 minutes trying to tear down a guest on your show using some of the most disgusting tactics I've ever experienced in 30 years of doing interviews. He took a step closer to her desk, his presence filling the entire studio. Let me tell you something, Kelly Clarkson, he said, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper again. I have been in this business longer than you've been alive. I have faced real racism, real discrimination, real challenges that you couldn't even imagine. And I have earned the right to have opinions, to speak my mind, to stand up for what I believe in. Kelly was crying openly now, but Samuel wasn't finished. You want to question my integrity? My right to speak about injustice? My contributions to my community? His voice began to rise with each question. Then you better come correct. You better have your facts straight. You better be prepared for a real conversation. Not this amateur hour ambush garbage you just tried to pull. Samuel, please, Kelly sobbed. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this, Kelly, Samuel said coldly. Sorry doesn't undo what you just did on live television. Sorry doesn't take back the disrespect you just showed me and everyone who looks like me. He straightened his jacket and looked directly into the camera. To everyone watching at home, he said, his voice now calm and dignified again, "This is what we still face. This is the kind of ignorance that still exists, even from people who smile and pretend to be your friends. Remember this moment. Remember how quickly respect can disappear when someone thinks they can get away with it." He turned back to Kelly, who was now slumped in her chair, mascara running down her cheeks. "And Kelly," he said, his voice carrying a finality that everyone in the studio could feel, "the next time you want to have a conversation about race, about justice, about anything that actually matters, maybe you should learn something about it first. Because this performance you just gave, this ignorant, disrespectful display, this is exactly why we still have problems in this country." Samuel L. Jackson walked toward the exit of the studio with the same dignity and presence he brought to the interview, but now there was something else in his bearing, something that made it clear that he was a man who had been pushed too far and had responded with the full force of his character and conviction. As he reached the edge of the stage, he turned back one final time. "Good luck explaining this to your audience, Kelly. You're going to need it." And with that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Kelly Clarkson Show, leaving behind a host in tears, a studio in chaos, and a moment that would define both of their careers forever. The cameras kept rolling as Kelly sat alone at her desk, the weight of what she had done settling over the studio like a dark cloud. The bright, cheerful set that had seemed so welcoming just minutes earlier now felt like a crime scene, and Kelly Clarkson, America's sweetheart, had just revealed herself to be something far uglier than anyone could have imagined.